Welcome back to Seeking the Truth About the Sword of Truth. Where were you? My name is Tom, and I'll be your guide as we spend this episode exploring Chapter 12 of Wizard's First Rule. In this very special episode of Seeking the Truth About the Sword of Truth, for those of you raised on radio, I have included a scavenger hunt for you as a collection of 188 randomly scattered references to songs by the band Journey, attempting to disguise themselves as a perfectly natural thing. Any of the 173 names of their songs is fair game, even the really obscure ones like Untitled Track number 17 and La Raza Del Sol. And to make things more interesting, I reserve the right to use the same song title more than once. So if you have nothing better to do on a Saturday night, then stay a while and listen. Pay close attention. You wouldn't want to miss any. While I'm not very good at poker, I'll try not to give anything away. Now that I've gotten you something else to find, I hope you find what you're looking for. Oh, and one more thing. Good luck. In our last episode, Richard and Kaylin are attacked by a couple of Gars, and Zed uses Wizard's Fire to blast all signs of life from their charred and burned bodies. And then, Richard almost gets his throat cut for trying to sneak up on someone else's property like he's got something to hide without waking anyone up. Please note that these episodes contain spoilers, heavy spoilers, about people and places in the series. Not just for this chapter, but for future chapters and books in the series. If you hadn't read the series yet and you intend to, I'd encourage you to read the books first. I'll wait patiently, and we'll meet again when you come back to see what I think about them. Spoiler alert, before you realize it, these books will have found a place in your heart. At the beginning of this chapter, best estimates place the time since the beginning of Wizard's First Rule on the 5th day. We begin the chapter in bed as Richard wonders why can't this night go on forever as Chase's wife wakes him up to participate in the most important meal of the day, bursting with her homemade love. When Kaylin joins them for breakfast, Richard's inner monologue says, "Good morning, girl," when he notices she is just attractive in her new outfit as she was in her white dress. And nothing a new set of clothing can't do is able to hide the fact that she definitely walks like a lady. While everyone else is eating breakfast, Chase is outside preparing everything they need for their epic journey. Kaylin enjoys a conversation with Emma about the mother-father dynamic with their children, and Zed embraces his breakfast with open arms, complimenting it repeatedly. While everyone else is enjoying breakfast, Richard realizes the party's over, people, and only solutions to the problems ahead will serve them faithfully, and they have little precious time to do it. Chase really knows how to make an entrance and gives Kaylin a startle, but the girl can't help it, and in her defense, the amount of weapons Chase is carrying looks like it's all too much. If he wasn't so frightening and majestic and projecting exactly how experienced he was with each of these weapons after all these years of practice, it would be enough to make a man look silly. Richard, having known Chase as well as he does after all these years, knows him to be a man of two basic expressions, feigned ignorance and a commitment to bloodshed. But in this instance, it is not the man who is at the center of this symbolism. It is the weapons that are on display. Each of his weapons represents a different skill or ability. A new idea or way of doing things, a new experience that you can nickel and dime your way through from the moment you wake up in the morning, day by day, until the moment you go to bed at night. Every day you live and breathe is a chance to grow, which is why they look frightening on Chase. Each weapon is a symbol for growth in the skills and areas of competence and education we acquire by our own efforts, which is why, when compared to the other characters, nothing comes closer than him as the symbol for independence. While the fear says, when you're alone, you're on your own, in a trial by fire, even though you're feeling that way, your experience opened the door which says you have all the backup you need, right? All the things, anywhere, anytime, any way, to take you all the way, every day, and shield you from a world gone wild. And that moment when you can finally say to yourself, I had what I needed, and I had what it takes to win. While they're leaving, Emma gives Zed a bag of fried chicken for the journey. So fresh and crispy, it would put the Colonel's secret blend of 11 herbs and spices, which work better together than any other combination of herbs and spices on Earth, to shame. This is the second offer made to these people about what will happen to their daughter's clothing. This was clearly a business arrangement where terms and conditions were set by both parties and agreed upon repeatedly. When you make a business arrangement like that, you never walk away. And let me lay it down here for you. Chase's wife never saw the clothing return. Kaylin isn't some backwater cookie duster. She is the mother confessor. And she looks into the eyes of a woman she has known less than 12 hours and promises someday soon this kindness will not go unrewarded, with no regard for the amount of bad karma she is creating for herself. If she could look into the future and see what she would face in the next dozen novels or so, maybe she would have thought twice about giving Buddha and Emma the business like that. She has the full power and authority of the Council of the Midlands at her disposal, and access to more money than Emma could ever imagine in her wildest dream. And even after the fall of the Council, she has access to the Andolian people, including intimate knowledge of the protocols necessary to request. They carry messages across vast distances reliably, which they are happy to give for little or no compensation whatsoever. A single gold coin would have more than covered the expense. The Bradstone family has some living to do, and all these repeated financial setbacks keep holding back an entire lifetime of dreams. There are so many things she can do to fix this throughout the series, and she never does. Before the four of them mosey off into the sunrise down that dusty old Dixie highway to face almost certain destruction, Emma gives them all a bit of positive touch. Zed kisses Chase's wife. Kaylin presses her body against Chase's wife with her arms around her and repeats her lies about returning the clothing in just the same way she did it before. Richard presses her body against Chase's wife with his arms around her, and Chase doesn't try any of that Han Solo knowing that you love me crap on her. Instead he says, "Baby, I am leaving you." So Emma gives him a kiss on the cheek, which he graciously accepts because when you love a woman, you let her kiss you goodbye and take that message of love and let it wash over you like a sun shower, especially if you might not be coming back from that trip into the line of fire across Mystery Mountain and the boundary of death. Everybody got some loving, touching, squeezing from Emma, and everybody leaves happy. Chase gives Kaylin a knife since she doesn't have one. Like a hustler, Richard asks Chase to borrow a knife from Chase since he left his at home, which Chase agrees to. And in that moment, it is already too late. Chase never sees that knife ever again. Richard becomes the first war wizard in 3,000 years to be born with both sides of the gifts, gets into the Temple of the Winds, leads a revolution, fights a dreamwalker, rescues souls from the abyss, opens the boxes of Orden, rescues Suzanne from the slide in Naked Empire, unravels the language of creation, and rewrites the laws of magic and prophecy at their very core. But somehow the one magic he can't seem to perform is the return of a simple knife to his lifelong friend. Immediately after seeing Chase give up 2 of his weapons to people who needed them, Kaylin asks Chase if he really needs all the weapons he brought. Chase metaphorically says, "I can see it in your eyes that you're worried, but I would certainly need them if I didn't bring them." When Chase gives Richard his weapon, the author describes the Boundary Warden as having an effortless command of each and every weapon and strap on him. In this moment, the symbolism would translate to the total beck and call we have over any skill we learn. Once it's ours, all that really matters is it becomes a part of us that we can use complete with liberty as we see fit, as an extension of our will. Richard sees a hawk flying overhead as they depart. If you believe in that sort of thing, in a collection of Native American symbology gathered by website warpathstopeacepipes.com, they cite some tribes as identifying the hawk as a symbol closely associated with forces such as rain, wind, and lightning. While there is some overlap within Native American symbology, a lack of consistency seems to get in the way of finding an elegant explanation there. The only reason I mention it was as a nod to Zed's warning that the seeker will draw his fair share of lightning. The ancient Egyptians believed the majestic hawk soaring high beyond the clouds related to the all-seeing Horus, commonly associated with the third eye, a mystical and esoteric concept of speculation, granting vision from a higher place, usually depicted as located on the forehead, representing the increased perception beyond ordinary sight, sort of omens, give me sight beyond sight. Analytical psychologist Carl Jung believed it represented the symbol of the self. According to DreamDictionary.com, the hawk may also be a symbol of danger caused by not following your intuition. The subconscious mind of the midnight dreamer knows the self-destructive nature can only see what is in front of it. The hawk encourages a person to see further down the road, acting as a message from the higher self urging change for the better as a person blindly goes forward in life, trying to keep us out of harm's way. The group travels into the Heartland Woods at a medium pace, passing through the Heartland Valley onto Hawker's Trail near Trunt Lake. Richard notices that the snake-like cloud is slowly following them, and he is happy to be leading that cloud away from Chase's home. Richard travels often, but knows this trip is different because he's going further than he ever has gone before. Dangerous places so dangerous, Chase warns him he needs to be very careful. As the narrator, Richard expresses apprehension because he feels like Chase doesn't worry enough about things. And if something makes him feel worried, then given his level of trust for Chase, by the transitive property, he should feel even more nervous than he already does. There are two nuggets of symbolism tied to this statement. I'll tackle the easier one first. Richard feels that Chase has a bad habit of worrying far too little. This is a common reaction to independence and self-reliance when viewed from that perspective. Independence and self-reliance are what allow the rational mind to take control. Those who accept on faith that their life is limited by self-imposed limitations on their own free will must also accept the futility of action under that system. No one using any rational part of their mind would attempt something they know is impossible. But often the decision is made about what is or isn't possible comes from a place of correlation without causation. Meaning one thing is stated, one thing is assumed, but really they have no connection to each other. It's a false connection. So everything that is really possible and visible in others creates cognitive dissonance, a feeling of contradiction in them where they question how this can be. Rather than view the obvious nature of achievement in the face of opposition by the consequences of application of effort and logic, which is at odds with their feelings, that tells them it's impossible to control the situation. And that dissonance, that perceived paradox, forever in blue, stuck in their head, makes them feel like the person doing it must somehow be wrong, even though it looks like they succeeded. They say it is only because Lady Luck was on their side, not because they had any real control over the situation. So with that line of reasoning, it becomes easy to explain away each and every success they observe as a streak of luck that isn't grounded anywhere in reality. And if a person succeeds too much and another person believes their own lie too much, it turns into another higher power that restricts them even further. It's not only the luck that gives this other person what they have, but it is a lack of luck given to them by this mysterious force they have invented that does not shine down upon them. They can sense something is holding them back. And every time they turn their thoughts inward to find out what that thing is, they see the paradox and feel this mental pain, this cognitive dissonance. They would rather turn down the world tonight and every night rather than confront the feeling which tells a person they're being held back by themselves and no one else. All cognitive dissonance can do is point out where the problem occurs. It does not give the solution. They are 100% correct that something is holding them back. They just can't see who took their power of free will and used it to invent a power that must be followed above else. They're blind to the fact that they were the ones that did that, and they really do have the authority to do such a thing. And because that higher power was built on feelings, it equates to an absolute truth. It has no power to do anything except convince a person they shouldn't try because they can only succeed if the power they invented lets them succeed, and it's really out of their control. That's the lie. From this moment on, every failure is no longer an opportunity to learn and grow. It is a rejection of value and validation. They ask, why don't I deserve the same advantages or luck or opportunity another person has? A person they have never met. A person they don't know, a person they haven't talked to, a person who has made hundreds of thousands of choices for their good or ill. They remove the value of those choices and replace it with the almighty luck of the draw, the winds of March, the random chance which favors them but not me. That is where the dissonance comes from, the apparent paradox, the thing that happens inside when we see a thing that gives our senses evidence or demonstrates something we believe and is at odds with it. The sensation creates a compulsion to meet the dissonance head on in an equal and opposite amount through the conservation of cognitive dissonance. A longtime friend or loved one reaching out to them will be unable to connect because the moment they trigger that dissonance, they will only add to it, making them ask, why are you doing this to me? Where did I lose your love? The part of their mind that turns into a scared little girl and says, if it's not them, it must be me. But I feel like it can't be me. Therefore, because I feel like it can't be me, in her subconscious mind, this scared little girl knows better, but still she cries. She feels, I must act like it can't be me and attack everything and anything which I feel is wrong because it is forcing me to feel this way and I don't like it. This perfectly describes the feeling Richard is having. Chase, the symbolic representation of a master of skills and abilities, which cannot exist in the mind of a person who feels like their independence is impossible. Chase doesn't make sense to that person. He has skills, he has authority, he has dominion, but they've already decided that it's not what you have and what you learn, it's what you're born with and what you're given. They appear reckless and even accusatory, making them imagine taunts and jeers like, "Who's crying now, you big baby? I think I'm so much better than you, and I know what a Rubicon is and you don't. You're just dumb." When in reality, they have just spent their precious and irreplaceable time more productively exploring previously unknown frontiers. Knowledge is earned, not given. That's the summation of the unwritten Wizard's Rule. While waiting to be given, they earn nothing, and every day growth is compared to expectation. The gap widens until the groups become so far apart in their skill and independence, it may as well be magic and mysticism what these people are able to accomplish. Even those who recognize this symbolic scared little girl wish, if only I could send her my love, I could make a difference. But just existing next to them provokes an undeniable dissonance by comparison. From so far away, they appear chosen somehow, while they were left behind. The fallacy causes them to forget they can choose to improve or not. Every cup of coffee is a choice. Every minute spent eating a sandwich is a choice. The harder choices are our own too. The choice to stay at a job we hate. We may have bad choices and therefore feel cheated, but we still choose. Feeling like your choices are all bad becomes a different higher power which functions exactly the same way. We are free to ignore the truth and those who speak it, but we can't escape the consequences. The truth is, we choose everything. And the more things we say we don't choose, the more we create and execute a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is a choice too. The difference in perception from the perspective of independence versus the perspective of subservience is the only part of significance here. Richard also says he is worried because he sees Chase as worried. Richard is traveling toward the boundary, the symbolic edge of a person's own private self-imposed limitations of what their rational mind is and isn't allowed to think of. This is a powerful and dangerous thing to face, and will be explained in future detail once we reach the chapters which describe the boundary a little bit more in detail. The point is, when part of the rational mind collides with their own feelings, that part must examine the paradox. And left to the feelings driving the decision-making process, the natural response is to cast out the thing which asks the question as having gone crazy. This is the wizard's 12th rule. You can destroy those who speak the truth, but you cannot destroy the truth itself. That includes the part of your mind which asks for the truth. We can and do destroy the truth. We reject within ourselves and expressed by others by instinct. That is just a fact. We will pick ourselves every time first, many times without any real reason backing it up other than we feel that we're right. As Richard observes Kaylin, Chase, and Zed ride down the trail, he gives each of them a mental once-over, doing what he always does, taking an inventory of the tools and skills at his disposal. Kaylin, the symbol for justice, master of an awesome but unknown power. Zed, the symbol for pride, powerful and dangerous, but content to live a simple and unassuming life and eat fried chicken. And Chase, the symbol of independence, armed to the teeth and feared by the people he protects, as well as the people he hunts. Only the young seem to be comfortable around Chase. This is the second time the author points out how good Chase is with children. It's not a mistake. This correlation is further evidence that points to Chase as the symbol for independence. Every little boy and little girl is taught, almost from birth, there are skills and talents they need to learn to be successful in life. The ability to speak, the ability to read and write, learning shapes, numbers, animals, simple math, and basic concepts, which will help them successfully navigate their lives. Children are shown by example early on the cold, hard truth which illustrates skill and competence equals empowerment. They see mom or dad, or the teacher, or the coach, or the friendly next-door grizzled war veteran who sits on a porch and tells it like it is, as more capable than they are and more powerful. Every generation can point to examples of the good times inspired by entertainment from their childhood. And a lucky few individuals can point to some of those good times from the television show Good Times. In an article written by Jack S. for 80skid.com titled 22 He-Man Facts Every 80s Child Should Know, the author references the dynamic, this particular dynamic being responsible for the show's success. Because He-Man is so strong, he always won. When He-Man stands up, wherever he might be, within a single moment, all he has to do is declare loud and proud, without shame or reservation, I have the power! Even today, it's enough to give a person goosebumps and conjure feelings of warmth and nostalgia. The power. This is the conservation of cognitive dissonance and is still a response to a feeling. But in this example, those feelings create a positive, powerful, and fundamental correlation between who has what power to prevail. The child internalizes the symbolism without ever knowing how or why, but they can't ignore the truth, which states, I have the power. I am the power. It is with me at all times, at my beck and call, and all I have to do is admit that it is there and use it. This symbolism is reinforced by the countless cause and effect observations they experience, learning skills to improve their lives and give them independence. It's not until the child leaves adulthood and enters the realm where they are masters of their own universe. They transform into a troubled child and choose what their failures and shortcomings mean. This creates dissonance. Did I fail because I don't have the right skills for the challenge in front of me? Or do I listen to what other people are saying when they tell me it isn't my fault and all I have to do is not be responsible for a failure, is accept that I really had never had the power to change anything at all? It is the worst fallacy of consent. And most often, children in healthy homes are surrounded by the things they need to get it right. Kids run around and yell, I have the power. It's morphin' time. Go gadget helicopter. Sword of omens. Give me sight beyond sight. Kohu Tekken Ramses. Give me power. Autobots. Transform and roll out. This looks like a job for Superman. Let's get dangerous. I'm smarter than the average bear. Wonder Twin powers activate to infinity and beyond. It's the same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world. Victory is mine. Respect my authority. By the sapphire and topaz I will have justice. Moon prism power. Let me at him. Here I come to save the day. I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman. All of those are expressions of independence and an ability to go out and do something by force of will alone. And their minds haven't been damaged enough by the fear of responsibility to rationalize away the appeal of these simple expressions of the same idea. We have the power. We always have. All we need to do is recognize it and be willing to to chase our own outcomes and accept the responsibilities of using that power. While they're walking away where the snake cloud was just near, Zed leaves a literal trail of chicken bones from where they started to where they end up nearly half a day later. Given that horses get tired and need to rest the same as people do, the average walking distance a horse can travel in a day is around 25 to 30 miles, spanning an 8-hour period before the horse becomes tired and will suffer negative health consequences if pushed past that for too long. So if an experienced tracker working for Dark and Raw was hunting Kaylin, after she was seen leaving a house by 50 scared eyewitnesses, traveling with Richard Cipher, the guy everyone knows, and Zed, the longtime friend and town helper, and most recently confirmed to be a warlock, Given Raw would have access to this information through Michael, and if his trackers were looking for Kaylin, a good place to start their search might be near Hawker's Trail, and the spot where the last quad was killed. Zed is leaving a literal trail of chicken bones that could be traced all the way back to Chase's house. Emma would probably still have the chicken bits that weren't good enough for cooking on top of their family's compost heap. A literal smoking gun linking her to that chicken, and likely a hard interrogation as a result without Chase around to help. Next, we're introduced to one of the most delusional conclusions a character has likely ever come up with in the history of recent fiction, when Richard says Kaylin looked over at him after she took off a layer of clothing in a cinematically placed sunbeam and gives him the special smile she never gives anyone else. Richard has known Kaylin for 5 days, and he was asleep for 2 of those days. What is he basing this on? The only explanation that sort of makes sense is maybe she told him she was giving him a new kind of special smile that she's never given anyone else. But that sort of interaction between 2 characters does not go unnarrated in the text of a love story between 2 characters. Richard's narration is spot on, however. He is a biased narrator, and such he sets the tone and ultimately describes reality in the terms he chooses. Richard can only think to himself, she makes me feel like loving you is easy, because when he looks at Kaylin, because his feelings are in full control of his mind right now, to be fair to him, once you love somebody, the rest of the world seems sweet and simple. And most of us agree there are people who look at us and we say, when I think of you, with your love, once I run into your arms, anything is possible and nothing else matters. He believes this. So it isn't bad writing. It's actually brilliant writing because it shows the reader how hopelessly enchanted he is with Kaylin in this particular moment. Because there is no way he can make that kind of assumption when he is in his right mind. And because he makes it anyways, that proves he isn't in his right mind. Richard asks his wizard friend if there's anything a wizard friend would be able to do about the evil magic cloud following them. And Zed, in a serious way, says he's been thinking about the wheel in the sky he could turn, but first he wants to get further away from Chase's house because he doesn't want to leave a search directly to their home. He says this immediately after he just finished leaving a chicken bone trail for the last 30 miles, starting at the point where the people following them are most likely to start looking, which leads directly to Emma and Chase's house. Along the way, Chase stops, asks the lonely old couple they encounter a few questions, and listens to their stories, adding yet another link in his trail of people, places, and things, which could link the three incredibly well-known people to this location at this time. These are very well-known and recognizable Heartlanders, and they are traveling with a beautiful woman with long hair. They tell him things that they have seen coming out of the boundary. The author says Chase treats the couple with more respect than Aretha Franklin got, but no matter how hard he tries, they just won't give it to him. Just a little respect, just a little bit, a little respect, just a little R-E-S-P-E-C-T as the author metaphorically describes a scene where Chase is asking them to give it to me and find out what it means to me in a grizzled voice, and he starts hitting things with those maces in his mind when he gets to the sock it to me, sock it to me, sock it to me's. The couple withholds validation from Chase and refuses to be anything but scared of him. Chase, being used to this sort of rejection, thanks them and tells them to stay inside at night, vowing to someday find the right audience so all of his song and dance routine training will not have been in vain. This representation is meant to come from the perspective of someone who is in the mindset of using their acquired skills for good and noble purposes. Despite their pure hearts in this, it is the natural state of those who lack independence to be fearful of confronting those who have it. Because that moment, it becomes impossible for them to deny that it is always a choice to end up there. Still, they ride and continue out into the open with repeated mentions of farm owners making themselves scarce when they see and recognize Chase, continuing the trail of breadcrumbs leading back to those old people, leading back to the chicken bones, ending at Emma and Chase's house. Richard thinks about this and says this is further than he usually travels, and it is much closer to the boundary than he's used to going. Close enough that he is next to some dead trees that have been killed by the snake vine. Chase is on high alert being so close to the boundary, examining everything, using 100% of his massive arsenal of talents to make his mission a success no matter what. That is symbolically the level of preparation we have once we encounter a challenge that falls into a skill we have already learned. It's deadly effective. Chase tells them he's going to scout ahead, and when he comes back, he tells them to keep going and stick to the path and not deviate from his plan so he can protect them, saying, "I'm going to leave you, but I'll be all right without you." Richard agrees, so Chase and the group go their separate ways so he can stop harm from reaching them. This is how our self-reliance interacts with our fallacies of consent. We can know with certainty we are in control and never have to face the interaction between a rational thought that meets the boundary of false correlation and rational exile. As the group continues without Chase, Richard describes the ominous and oppressive nature of the path they are on. The trees press in so tightly from all sides that they block out the sun, and they have to continue on in the shade. When the author writes, Richard didn't like how close everything felt. We're also given the first recorded instance of Richard's dislike of small spaces. This moment sets up a subtle expectation which will pay dividends further in the novel when Richard must face his fear more directly with the monster in the cave leading to Scarlet's egg. According to Stella F. Lorenzo, Ph.D., a cognitive psychologist at Emory University in Atlanta, she says, "We've known for a long time that fear and anxiety can disrupt cognitive processes. In 2011, the American Psychological Association released an article defining what may trigger claustrophobia, saying the larger range of space that a person considers to be near is directly linked to how claustrophobic they will feel. They also found participants with the largest near spaces were also the most likely to report claustrophobic symptoms, because encroaching on personal space triggers fear and anxiety more strongly in them than in others. This anxiety hijacks the body's flight or fight response faster than Kanye West at the 25th annual MTV Music Video Awards when he took the microphone from Taylor Swift during Award for Best Female Video to say, "Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish, but Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time." The fight or flight instinct is a defensive response, triggering within the amygdala, automatically activating fight or flight responses by sending out signals to release stress hormones that prepare the body to fight or flight and keep on running as far away as possible if flight is the chosen response. This response is triggered by emotions like fear, anxiety, aggression, and anger. The heart rate accelerates, increasing oxygen flow to the major muscles, and it is the body's attempt to improve our odds of survival during tense situations, which is the reason for this. As Zed, Kaylin, and Richard travel, they hear terrifying screams, growls, and howls, all described as desperate and urgent to kill, which create a chain reaction causing everyone, including the horses, to feel like running faster. This is a symbolic representation of the flight response within the rational mind, when it gets too close to irrational, but tightly held self-imposed beliefs. Similar to Richard's reaction when he realized it was okay to feel angry about the death of his father, even though his father taught him anger was wrong. That created a very tense reaction within him, and because it was an irrational thing holding him back, Richard had a very hard time confronting it. In chapter 66 of Faith of the Fallen, we see the same dynamic, but instead of using thoughts to analyze the situation rationally, as Richard does with his feelings about anger, others, when confronted with the powerful input from the senses, which elegantly and irrefutably stands in the way of a self-accepted and previously long-held belief, run from the stimuli, cursing it as they have just been robbed of their life savings, rather than face what is in front of them and obvious. The desire for departure and the need to protect whichever idea was first, regardless of what new information may come to light, is a common response to cognitive dissonance. Even when they can plainly observe their metaphorical villages and faulty logic and flimsy justification, castles burning down around them, the reasoning is to retreat to another castle without ever asking what started the fire which destroyed the last one. In an article for Scientific American written in November of 2015 titled, "What Happens to the Brain During Cognitive Dissonance?" the author states, cognitive dissonance is that uncomfortable feeling you get when you try to maintain two or more inconsistent beliefs at the same time, and goes on to say researchers have recently identified key brain regions linked to cognitive dissonance. The area implicated most consistently is the posterior part of the medial frontal cortex, or the PMFC. That is known to play an important role in avoiding aversive outcomes, and is a powerful built-in survival instinct. So things that feel bad are dangerous, according to this prefrontal cortex. Additional studies reveal cognitive dissonance engages our brain, other brain regions, like the insula and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. The insula, which processes emotions, becomes more active when people are upset or angry. The DLPFC is strongly associated with cognitive control. One study found that disrupting the activity of the DLPFC by zapping it with electrodes reduces the extent to which we try to rationalize our beliefs following cognitive dissonance. After about an hour of listening to the terrible sounds coming from the beasts of the boundary, Richard has had all he can stand, and he can't stand it no more. He stops the horses and tells everyone they need to help Chase, saying he might be in trouble and he can't let him do the thing he asked them to let him do alone. Excuse me. Zed tells Richard Chase is doing his job, and his job is to listen to what he told him to do. Zed tells him Chase has sworn to protect him, and his main goal is to get them all to the pass. He reminds Richard that what they are doing is more important than one man's life, and whether he is dead or alive when it happens, Chase's main objective is to get them safely to the pass through the boundary. If he should break your heart in the process by dying, then you can't let his death be for nothing. A quick analysis of this exchange following the conservation of cognitive dissonance shows a rapid-fire series of equal and opposite responses between Zed and Richard. Richard, by his own admission, being grounded and guided by his emotions in the form of being unable to stand it any longer, says they have to stop and help Chase. He feels this is right and is no longer able to act like this isn't right. Zed tells him we have to keep moving, a logical statement born of Chase's request for them to keep moving. Richard knows this logically, but he isn't making decisions based on logic at the moment. When Richard looks, this logic is the contradiction he is trapped in. My lonely feeling, my apprehension, my self-doubt, my fear are the enemies he responds to this challenge directly in equal and opposite fashion. Giving the things he is now thinking of, I got a reason which is more important to me, which justifies the feelings I am having. Through Richard's own third-person narration, he again admits he's not in full control of his action through the phrases, he couldn't bear it any longer, and he had to help. From that moment on, Richard is not in control of his rational mind because he is trapped behind a velvet curtain of emotion. Richard responds to Zed's counter-argument equally and oppositely when he says, he may be in trouble, we can't let him do this alone, which causes Zed to get caught in the cycle as well. Challenged by Richard, Zed responds with, well, la-di-doo-da-di-doo-da. Do you recall what Chase said not 1 hour ago? It is his job, let him do it. The direct impact of logic and feeling jolts Richard again, causing him to try and defend his feelings behind his choice and make his point more forcefully, seeking to have his feelings validated instead of challenged. The cognitive butting of heads continues for some time, where direct cognitive force is used in each of them in an attempt to force the other members of the group to agree with them through the strength of their argument rather than asking them to agree by their own free will. While this argument continues, the narration notes that the sounds of the howls are getting closer. Kaylin becomes involved and adds the force of her cognitive violence behind Zed's when she also uses facts and reason to force Richard to see logic without asking for his consent regarding anything she has said. Richard, being pressed by logic, attempts to appeal to her emotions, invoking the old correlation without causation defense, challenging that she would feel differently about this if she were in his position and he needed to rescue her instead. Kaylin stands firm and rejects his position by telling him he is wrong, and she would have him go on. For the second time, we're told that the shrieks are getting closer, with no end to their conflict in sight. Finally, Zed remembers the wizard's 13th rule about not being able to challenge a person's mind or opinions without their consent, and uses a little bit of compassion, approaching Richard with open arms to help him feel a little bit less defensive. Coming at Richard head-on, even though he is factually correct, is not having the intended effect because they are speaking two different languages and can't understand each other. Zed and Kaylin have been speaking the language of reason, and Richard is speaking the language of emotion. Zed recognizes this and starts speaking to Richard's feelings instead of his thoughts, because currently those feelings are in charge of the decision-making process. Zed engages Richard emotionally by using the words given to him to give him reassurance. Zed lies to Richard's face when he implies knowing that everything will be all right because Chase does this all the time. Logically, it's as useful as when someone decides to play some music to cover up the smell of a particularly robust flatulence. That's correlation without causation. Chase could have done this 100 times, but there is no guarantee that past performance can predict future outcomes. Next, he invents a story about how Chase is feeling at the moment and says he's likely having a good time. He quickly follows that lie up with a piece of information Richard knows to be true about Chase, creating a false correlation without causation in Richard, leading him to believe that because Chase likes to embellish his stories, he must be having a good time, and therefore isn't going to be killed by the beast he is keeping from them. Once Zed broke the cycle of secular conservation of cognitive dissonance with some empathy, through confrontation, Richard's mind is set in stone. In love, Richard is finally able to process the feelings which weren't being validated, resulting in the decision to keep moving. While he's not happy about it, he does continue, and going over the thoughts in his head while he does so. He lists all the powerful rationalizations standing in the way of his decision to be okay with what is happening, and none of them are rooted in fact. Each of them is rooted in the snap emotional response he is feeling in the moment. Richard narrates it made him angry. He didn't like it. He didn't want it to make sense. Even though he is having those feelings, he still continues to follow the path chosen by reason over the path chosen by how he feels. Once this decision is made, the howls and cries fall further and further behind. This exchange is to show what happens to the rational mind when it tries to overpower cognitive dissonance through force of sincerity and force of rationalization. All rational progress stops dead, as an equal and opposite cognitive force is created by the exercise, doing nothing but making the mind more and more vulnerable to the feelings of dissonance, pushing them to dig in. This process of digging in is a descent into the reinforcement of the irrational, and the sounds of the monsters coming from the boundary to destroy them getting closer and closer is meant to illustrate how digging in to fight, how needing to be right, the need to think clearly, goes away and make sure that the person gets his right. The path is paved with good intentions, and that will lead a person straight to the destruction of their rational mind. You cannot force a person to change their mind through logic, reason, or otherwise. You can only ask them. That is the only path, and any other attempts lead to the destruction of the rational mind. The existence of emotion is neither good nor evil. The existence of the rational mind, which may operate independently of emotion, is also a neutral force. Both exist, both have the potential for good or evil, depending on how they're used. The use of rationale and reason to make decisions, followed by an emotional assessment of how the decision makes a person feel, is a very different dynamic than the one that uses emotion to arrive at a decision, followed by a subversion of all parts of the rational mind, which try to explore any information that contradicts what those emotions have found. It's putting the chicken before the egg. It's putting the cart before the horse. Chase warned them not to run and stop. That is where the author is symbolically saying here. We are always under the right influence of the fight and flight responses to cognitive dissonance. And both of these things are bad examples of things which can assume control of our decision-making process without having the slightest idea of how to do it successfully. Meaning, fight and flight are both bad choices. Running is to escape and ignore the contradiction without passing through it. All realms of thought remain inaccessible if flight is chosen as an option. You run from the ideas and go no further. Responding to the dissonance emotionally doesn't result in a better life, and trying to fight it is the psychic equivalent of beating one's head against a brick wall. Nothing is accomplished, and in a butterfly effect-like fashion, those feelings are only fed and made more powerful, taking even more control over the rational mind. The only answer that helps you be good to yourself is to acknowledge the feelings as real, but also acknowledge that those feelings aren't your master. You are theirs. Even if the person in charge is using that choice to put a collar and letting that chain to that collar be held someone else, a topic we will cover in greater detail when we reach the Mord Sith. You can't tame the lion, but you can convince the lion to tame itself. As they ride further from the howls and screams, Richard reflects on his own actions and feels silly for acting the way he did. He admits it was his own fear which led him to make that choice. Richard repeats the reassuring lies Zed told him about Chase being in control of the situation. But even then, his rational mind recognizes the lie, and he admits, while he knows Chase to be capable of much, he might die. And Richard wonders what he would tell Emma if Chase got shipped off to the City of Angels in a pine box. Once Richard makes the decision to listen to Chase, instead of his desire to rush off after him, notice how he immediately begins layering rationalizations over it, in much the same way he was layering rationalizations over his decision to go after him. At this moment in his character development, Richard is still not fully a realized individual. Having a step-by-step rational explanation and knowing the answer is the correct answer is not enough for him to go on. His actions are still limited by what he feels is right. Because he knows he must go on and has no choice, he must then, by that dynamic, layer rationalizations over the feelings he has to have confidence in them. Or to put it differently, Richard has not yet internalized the wizard's 8th rule. He may know he has the right answer, but he can't fully accept that answer if parts of it make him feel bad. So while he is riding in silence, he starts giving himself reasons to not feel bad about the things he was worried about a few minutes ago. He tells himself he was letting his imagination run away with him. Chase was fine, and not only was he fine, he was so fine that he would be mad at Richard for doubting him. So while his anger fades and makes peace with his course of action, he is still not able to do so on the strength of his own character. Richard's mind tells him he can only accept this as a valid course of action after he evokes the authority of his friend, trusting how he would feel if Richard doesn't listen. Richard gets the right answer when he gets the answer logically and listens to that. And according to Zed, all that matters is the result, even though he is trying to rationalize this choice in a way that doesn't really matter. He has the right choice. It doesn't matter why he got there. Richard notes that he has never been this close to the boundary before. Symbolically, the boundary is part of the mind which we recognize as dangerous to the rest of the psyche, best avoided. Some of the most common examples of this recognition manifest as a consensus to avoid discussions about the topics where the bulk of the irrational devotion to cognitive dissonance exists, rather than the rational assessment of what is going on around you. If you or someone loved by you has ever agreed that it is best not to discuss religion or politics because it always ends in an argument, that is an admission of their knowledge the person is making a statement to not discuss those things because they are not capable of doing so without losing control of their rational mind. The pull to follow the effects of cognitive dissonance, the desire to stop everything in the world and publicly point out the thing that looks or feels wrong, is the driver of their decision-making process. In short, when a person feels like they believe something, they can't fully embrace that belief without the validation of others. They also can't comfortably maintain that belief when there exists any sort of information that causes them cognitive dissonance. Which means if they don't fully believe that, and they know they don't, they are not comfortable with the mere existence of anything that disagrees with what they believe. The dissonance, the negative feeling, overrides the feelings associated with their position, challenging it, distracting them like a sexy fan dance with all the colors of the spirit waving around, which seek to hide the truth from them at all costs, because the truth is they are the ones causing themselves pain. Dissonance is conserved when the person combats that feeling by fighting back, the attack, with a weaponized request for validation. The consent to change another person's mind is not recognized. That attempt is made by force instead. It creates the same desire for validation from the source of the information that made them feel that way in the first place. If you or a loved one has experienced a powerful and almost irresistible desire to present unsolicited information or opinions for no other reason than to make sure as many people as possible, especially the person who you are disagreeing with, sees it, then you may be acting under the influence of cognitive dissonance. This dynamic is best avoided by observing the proper order of operations within your mind. While emotions, stimuli, and cognitive dissonance are faster, they do not supersede the function of the mind and remove a person's free will, including when a person chooses to inject emotion into their train of thought. The first step is an unbiased thinking about the facts of a situation, and then, after a full and impartial viewing of the situation from all sides, including from the perspective of the side the person doesn't agree with, especially from the perspective of the side a person doesn't agree with, at least 3 times more thoroughly thought through from a full and fair perspective of the side a person doesn't agree with, including trying to come up with a list of reasons against the side you do not agree with. After a person is able to do all of this, their world is big enough and their view of the situation is complete and unbiased. Only then is a person capable of making a decision about how that makes them feel, which is rooted in reality. In short, it is foolishness to expect to be right about anything regarding something which is admittedly not fully understood. Feelings are natural and necessary, but feelings turning off the brain before it has a chance to fully explore what is in front of it is self-destructive and short-sighted. Richard feels better. His anger fades away. Kaylin smiles. Richard's mind turns back on. While he rides, Richard tries to daydream what the dead forest looked like before all the trees died. He puts his faith in the Heartland Woods as he imagines how it used to be a beautiful place, green, safe, and full of life, like the other places he's familiar with. I could spend the next few minutes explaining the symbology of this as well, but it really speaks for itself. The behavior which makes and feeds dissonance destroys a beautiful thing when it is allowed to spread. Figuratively, I'm crying on the inside because it is the saddest loss of human potential there is. While they travel, Richard realizes once again, once he makes it to the Midlands, he has no idea where to start looking. As the sunset and the evening creeps in, Kaylin, Zed, and Richard come to a river with a wooden bridge across it. Richard doesn't trust the bridge and finds out it has been tampered with. Zed doesn't want to get wet because the bridge won't hold their weight. Richard says it's just the rain flowing past them, and too bad unless he has something better he can do about it. Zed says it's never too late until you give up. Hold my beer. And he unleashes a semi-phenomenal, fairly impressive power to keep the boards and branches from getting wet while his friends walk their horses over them. The question of who tampered with the bridge is never mentioned again and is the mystery of a lifetime. We have very little information about it. The bridge is not far from Hawker's Trail and is closer to the boundary of the Midlands. The bridge was tampered with by removing the pins which secure the wood to granite blocks, making it easy to fail and easy to fall into the river if too much weight is put on it. Given the existence of the bridge at all, there must be some traffic going across the trail, and since the bridge is still standing, it is likely the tampering was recent. Once the bridge collapses, it falls into the river and is swept away. This tells us the speed of the water is deep enough and fast enough to absorb the wood of an entire bridge and sweep it downstream. That would mean the act of tampering with the bridge, while not impossible, was more than a casual exercise, suggesting dedicated and deliberate intent, and possibly skilled intent. And given the location of the bridge on one of the lesser used trails, the tampering would imply that this was done by the direction of someone who had intimate knowledge of the geography of Westland. Given all of that information, the most likely architect behind the tampering of the bridge would be Michael. The last time Michael saw his brother was at the party a few days ago. Michael is working under the influence of Dark and Raw, and while he would have known where Richard and Zed's houses were, a rather routine part of trying to find someone is to set up roadblocks and ambushes along likely routes of escape. Unless the sabotage of the bridge is purely coincidental, Michael has the motive, means, and opportunity to arrange something like this in a short amount of time. It's not proof, but under modern standards it would be more than enough to open an investigation, unless the person being investigated were influential enough to make life difficult for the people asking those questions. In that instance, even video evidence and documented trails a mile long wouldn't be enough to get that job done. I would find you all a better solution, but that's the best I could come up with. If anyone comes up with something I missed, if it's interesting enough, I'll make a point of it to mention it in a future episode. After the bridge, all of them continue on the trail under cover of darkness. It is impossible to see the sky through the thick canopy of trees, and while they're safe on the path, they're surrounded on all sides by darkness and noises which conjure the promise of angry and dangerous creatures. This passage is the first example Goodkind uses to describe what it's like to try and navigate rationally through the sorts of ideas tied to our most deeply held cognitive dissonance. Those feelings which decide for us before we think are the strongest and the most dangerous. Even the act of thinking about things next to them creates a sense of foreboding and dread. The rational mind knows that psychic pain is not far away, and if the rational mind allows the presence of psychic pain to determine what trains of thought can and cannot be pursued, then the fear of psychic pain becomes another master to serve alongside the master they were already serving by choosing to flee real psychic pain whenever they encounter it. The narrow path is meant to represent a journey which is possible for a person to navigate through the tangled web of fears and rationalizations which keep us from viewing a situation objectively. This path is a dangerous and specific one with very little room for error on either side. Fighting is not the answer. Flighting is not the answer either. The only answer is the path, and that path represents that which is true. When truth feels neither good nor bad, that is the moment a person knows they are on the correct path. When truth feels so good that anything is justified to maintain it, the rational mind is lost. When truth is so terrifying that all contact and traces of it are scrubbed from a person's life, much like unfriending and unfollowing a person who holds different political or religious beliefs, the rational mind is lost. Only by walking the path of objective and unbiased thought can a person safely navigate their own feelings of paradox and confusion. All of those feelings come from within, and it is the departure from the path of simply recognizing what is and what isn't that causes it. The wizard's 6th and 9th rules are the guide here. Reason is the only tool capable of recognizing true knowledge, and contradictions can't exist. If a person feels cognitive dissonance, then they feel a contradiction which they instinctively know cannot be true. Giving up reason is to give up the ability to resolve the contradiction. All a person can do once the decision has been made to run from the consequences of that decision is to run from the consequences of that decision. They are no longer capable of forcing themselves to look at it. They flee. And that is a loss of the rational mind. Richard hears noises from the woods on his left, cracking and breaking branches, getting closer and closer by the minute. He tells himself it might be Chase, but he can't be sure if he's being chased by Chase or chased by something more sinister. Realizing he won't be able to get out ahead of it, Richard realizes he's going to have to do something. He pulls the sword of truth free and runs his horse to meet the challenge head on. Once committed, Richard gives himself over to the choice, because he knows no amount of wishing will banish what he knows to be coming for them. Notice here how Richard decides to run forward and is committed to fight. The series of events is meant to reinforce the theme of moral neutrality for many of the self-destructive things we decide have the final say in our decision-making process. We've already established that the feelings are neither good nor bad, they just are, and it's what we do with them which matters. Fighting is neither good nor bad, nor is running. Both simply exist, and it is the use of these things which makes them good or bad. Richard's actions make sense here because of the order of operations. Richard is listening to the woods. He's looking for trouble, hearing something which could be a threat, analyzing it, realizing it will get out in front of them no matter what they try to do. Then he decides the safest course of action is to ride ahead and be prepared to fight. Once committed, then the anger comes forward to give his actions strength. There can be only one master, and feelings which must first subdue that which is making a person make a choice are not as strong as feelings which are held back until a choice has been made. So it is easier to make a decision how you feel after you have looked at this, and those feelings then will not be in control of your actions, whereas feeling first and acting on that leaves you very little control. When it's done in the wrong order, feelings which must first subdue the will of the person making a choice are not as strong as feelings which are held back until a choice has been made. One fights itself, the other is unopposed. Richard sees a black form moving into the trees onto the path in front of him. He raises the sword of truth, ready to swing the edge of the blade in self-defense to cut through the threat. He doesn't notice until it's almost too late that the black form which has been chasing them was Chase all along. Chase tells Richard to keep his sword out and guides them the rest of the way to follow him. Because our feelings can lie to us, and because our reason can be built on lies, the only protection a person has against self-destructive cognitive dissonance is the truth, not our truth, not the truth as we see it, but an actual objective truth which is neither good nor bad. It's just accepted as true. After choosing a fork in the woods, Chase leaves everyone out of the thick, dark trees into the starlights of the open country air. Richard, having just been scared on a horse for the last 3 to 4 hours, says, "Boy, Chase, what's all this then?" Chase tells him they were things from the bounty trying to get them, which is why he didn't want them to go too fast. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to protect them and keep up at the same time. That is to say, symbolically, there is a relationship between our independence and our rational mind. While we can accomplish much with talent and skills we acquire, we must still be mindful of the practical limitations that those skills and abilities have. Once again, balance is the answer. Too much faith in our independence and self-reliance can cause irrational expectations of competence. Too little independence, and the mind will not be strong enough to handle any additional stress at all. Chase says as much when he tells Richard to cut the back talk and listen to him. And his friends, the next time Chase tells him what the right thing to do is when one is near the boundary. There are very specific cause and effect relationships here. And imagining that it works any way you want it is a recipe for disaster. It could have been you who needed rescuing when the start of the whole situation could have been avoided if you had just listened from the start. Richard narrates that he knows they are right. And even now, his feelings are telling him not to feel good about it. Richard still needs his feelings to be in line with what his mind and senses are telling him. Once they reach the top of a hill, the party makes camp, preparing to spend the evening there. While Chase and Zed are handling the horses, Richard and Kaylin have a bit of alone time while they make a fire. With a tear in his heart and the gallantry on his sleeve, Richard tells Kaylin that if it had been her, he would have come after her. The author also adds that he means more than the words he had just spoken. Kaylin says, "Don't be down on me, baby, but you shouldn't say that." And she walks away. But all Richard can think is, while her words say, "Stop being stupid," her lips are telling him not to be stupid, are really saying, "Kiss me softly." There's unrequited romance in the air, and Richard struggles with this as his feelings are being allowed to influence his decision-making process without his thinking. He hasn't realized yet that loving Kaylin can be just as dangerous as hating Dark and Rawl. The rational mind doesn't care how parts of it are destroyed. It only knows that parts of it are lost, unable to live again. And Zed, as Zed always says, dead is dead. Once Richard has a moment to observe his surroundings, he notices Chase has been through a harsh battle. He has blood all over him. Some of his weapons are broken, and there are broken teeth and claw marks all over his armor. Richard says, "What sort of creatures caused all this then?" And Chase tells him they were hearthounds. Big canine creatures, twice the size of a wolf, lots of teeth, which have the ability to hear the person's beating heart from inside their chest. Others say the name comes from a tendency to hunt in packs and kill by ripping out the heart, fighting over it amongst themselves. In an article for wagwalking.com titled "The History Behind Dogs Hearing Heartbeats," we learned that this has been scientifically proven that dogs and wolves can hear the heartbeat of nearby animals. Given that wolves performed better in the study than dogs, it seems reasonable that hearthounds could have even keener senses than that, and therefore would be able to locate a person by the sound of their heartbeat alone. Simply put, the heart hounds are the fears we carry with us. Because they are a part of us, our mind knows about them no matter how much we try to ignore them ourselves. The fear is the sound of the heartbeat that these heart hounds use to locate us when we are most vulnerable. Richard asks if they can go in and out of the boundary without being claimed by it and why that is. Chase tells him it's because that's how the magic works. They can go in and out of it, but they can't go very far from it. That symbolism is just saying our rational mind knows what it is good at and knowing where it doesn't feel comfortable. And being in range of those heart hounds is kind of similar to being close to ideas and thoughts, which makes us uncomfortable when others disagree, such as religion or politics, to name a few. Getting too close to the end of rational thought or the boundary opens us up to angles of attack which leave us vulnerable to allowing our feelings to dictate our choices, causing us to lose the one thing which matters most, access to our rational mind. Chase says the hounds are straying further and further from the boundary, and this makes the trail they are on dangerous. But since the other route would add an entire week to a journey where time is short, Kaylin tells everyone heart hounds are tan-like. They're like deer, and they are running loose in the Midlands because the boundary has failed between the Midlands and Dahara. Even during the daytime they're found, which was previously unheard of. The symbolism changes a bit for this piece of information. The boundary to Westland represents the boundary of our rational mind and what it creates when it assumes something to be true which actually isn't. All information beyond that decision is lost in favor of already having an answer. The boundary between the Midlands and Dahara is already down by Dark and Raw's hand. Because he has access to magic, he could break it down. Now the heart hound's running loose everywhere instead of just inside the cognitive boundary. This is like the wizard's rules, which can be used to conjure these stories and narratives regardless of where they are in the mind. This intervention by an outside power is an attempt to subvert the free will of man when it is weaponized and used maliciously. Richard isn't happy about this and asks what other terrible things are in the Midlands, which are even worse than what he already knows about. While he doesn't mean this as a question, Kaylin takes a moment of silence for an up-close, medium-angle, fireside, cinematic camera shot before she answers quietly, Dark and Raw. It's time for the number one quote from Seeking the Truth About the Sword of Truth and with Wizard's First Rule for Chapter 12. Please note that the views and opinions of what the official number one quote from this chapter is may differ from the views and opinions expressed by you about what your number one favorite quote for this chapter is. In the event that your number one quote is different from the one mentioned here, please list your candidate for number one quote in the comments below. And the official number one quote for this chapter is, when Zed says, later on he'll have a good tale to tell. You know, Chase, some of the tale may even be true. In the next chapter, everyone takes turns having heart-to-heart talks with Richard, and Zed tells him, stop acting like a spaceman and get your head out of the clouds thinking about Kaylin, and start acting like a spaceman and get your head into the clouds by helping him cover up the cloud in the sky that's been following you since the beginning of the story. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you feel like you've gotten something of value from this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you really like it, I ask you to share a link to this video with those who you think may enjoy it as well. If those feelings aren't there yet, I invite you to come back for the next episode and give me a chance to try and change your mind. Thank you for watching. My name is Tom, and I have been your guide. This has been Seeking the Truth About the Sword of Truth. Come and join me next time, so while I am seeking these truths, you can become seekers of that truth as well. Until then, don't stop believing, live your life to the fullest, and live each day like it's a day you'll never get back. John Kane solo, Neil Sean solo, Steve Smith solo, Generations EPK. Good night, everybody.